Life that can be imagined can be the life that can be lived. Why I thought about that, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm so confident and reflecting my life, I see that happening. So imagination is power. I think that's Einstein said. And I can relate to that as a scientist, what he may have imagined. Actually, I can think of that theory of relativity. I can think how he may have imagined to a degree. The famous saying is that he was picturing himself in the elevator. Oh no, speed of light, flying or something like that. Makes sense. Anyway, the other important quote I can share is that there's a president in Japan when I was consulting the company, Mr. Suzuki Hikojiro, I think was his first name. He wrote a book called Life is the Creation of Your Imagination. That's very fitting as an entrepreneur making a business successful in pharmaceutical industry. And I enjoyed the talk, know about his personality and learning. The spirit of imagination is power. So there are instances like that I can relate to. Edison, when I was 80 years old or something, 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. What imagination. I was so inspired. I still remember the scene. This was at the elementary school. I was going down the stairs and I can hear the sound of kids playing outside, and I felt like I'm a different guy. They're playing, but I know something truthful or unique, important in my life or something. I do remember. So I didn't become a scientist or good engineer, but I did invented some ideas, the patent in nuclear industry and others. So that spirit that I gained was so important. I should be able to come up with some other inspiring moment, but I could capture by even looking and watching the YouTube video, the ones who's got so much spirit and energy, and you can get into it. So I made those references in my life, like triangulating different people in different industry or area of focus, and somehow synthesizing them to come up with my own imagination of how I live. And that became the source of my energy to do something with some inspiring idea behind. I think making money was one of the inspiration, but I don't think I succeeded in that one, except I even worked in the private equity industry, known to be perhaps the top of the food chain, playing with money and getting paid fairly well. So those things can happen. It may not happen, but can happen. And that's the way probably biologically too. And the universe is made, the law of the universe, because the tree grows, insect grow, they all go process of evolution. I talked about the life is like a tree, the root and the stem, or the trunk and the branches and out and going through all the difficulties and manage to live. And you have so many trees of different kind, very straight or winding, crooked tree, and they have their unique way of expressing what they can as they do. And we may not know it, the background, but if you go back to those historical, evidence from the fossil and so forth, we can track back and changing the DNA and whatever that is relating to how the environment changes. They may have created the imagination of this way and that way, lots of trial and error. The life is trial and error. That's what it is. But we can have image, but image may not happen as it could because the environment changed and you are changing. So it's very, convoluted process, complex process. We may not know, but that's life. So that's where I think the passion, the life energy may be found or executed, processed to seek for the solution. I had the event of my one cat dying. There's one other cat that's still alive, and I could feel more or less, my imagination again. His behavior has changed. He's looking for a new way of living because his great friend that he was cuddling with and having a great time with is gone. And observing how he's living, behavior, and see adjustment being made. Maybe my imagination, but that's the imagination I'm talking about. That imagination is power to find the passage of our life, not just invention or investment or management. They're all related of living being, and that's fascinating to me. So imagination is power, help us to live well. And if I say it differently, if we don't have a good imagination, then we get stuck. Or if you have a bad imagination, you end up with Putin. I hate to say about Trump, because some people like Trump. But somehow it doesn't fit to my profile of someone who I would dream of to become. What's the point of having money and fame? That's always has been the case. And my reference for that I may have mentioned in my video was Pascal, Blaise Pascal and Pensée. What's the point of human life in this limited space of time, limited space and time, and what can you do? So that brought me to the imagination of Zen. And I met Daisetsu Suzuki. I read most of his book. I don't know, thousands of pages and over. It's just fascinating, and I didn't know what there was. Just like Edison seeking for something, Daisetsu was seeking for something, the truthful way of living, if you call that, a spiritual life. And his energy and the amount of books he'd written, all different angles from Zen to Shin Buddhism to Meister Eckhart and Christianity and the Kabir and Sufism and others. It's just fascinating. And if you look at all the Kabir and all the poems, there are lots of imagination in there. And that is so inspiring for me. It's not guaranteed, it's just imagination, but there's something as energy to trigger us to want to believe that it's feasible. And to live a life with a dream, even if life is a dream, it's a good way to look at it. The dream meaningful, to find what we really like, enjoy the process ourselves, and helping others. So the imagination or anything of that nature is there already in our genes for all the living beings. So follow the laws of nature, one of my mantra, melting into nature with imagination. But imagination is evidenced by the reality of how they do. When I was very little, I think this is 10 years old, 11 years old, there was a science club and there was an instructor. And she showed me one of the tree where the leaves, this is a thorny kind of leaves, but orienting themselves in a manner that the leaves in a thorny form is pointing into the sun direction, like a Christmas tree. One of those branches, if you look carefully, you see that they have maneuvered the way so that they have a structure to face the sun in the right way to get the maximum dose of sunshine, given the limited resources. So trees, branches, all of that has imagination. You can call all the virus and so forth have imagination as a part of DNA, let's call it like that. But one thing I want to add, and it's important for me to say something about, it's Saichi. It's the Myokonin in Shin Buddhism. And his saying had so much image or profound saying that I didn't know what it is. But like any other books I've read, when I'm interested in certain person view, I get deep into it. Not many people, but I choose the ones that inspires me with my imagination connecting somewhere. And you go deep into it. And I've read many of those sayings, and I couldn't figure out, but I'm finding like I'm like Saichi. I feel like him. I can understand what he's saying, why, and how he lived his life with compassion. And to me, that's just one evidence. I wasn't the inventor like Thomas Alva Edison, but I could contribute something with patent, stuff like that. But in the case of Zen or Shin Buddhism, and the influence from Zen led me into Saichi and those Myokonin as well. He even said in one of the literature I found that Daisetsu said when he sees the Myokonin died and see the face of it, Daisetsu said that he feel like he want to die with them. That's a profound saying of, famous Zen and Shin scholar, feeling the sense of how they lived and how they died. There's something in there, imaginary, to make me to want to. And if I say a few more things about Daisetsu, I mentioned somewhere when I start to study Zen, because Pansei didn't give me the answer, I was once having my tears coming out when I read his book on Zen. I didn't understand what he was saying, but I was impressed by the fact that he's working so hard to try to make us to understand the point of Zen. And out of his books, I could feel it. So there's something communicating, and we can communicate with tree and the cat and so forth, if we have the sense, if we call imaginary sense, or whatever the intuitive sense, make us to be excited about something. It may or may not happen, but imagination is certainly power. And if we have good references to lead us to live our life, not the bad reference, hopefully the ones that... But even the bad reference helps us to believe that's not the right image if we can detect that. So it's a tricky process, and the life is a tricky process. Lots of suffering can happen. But out of the suffering, like the flowers bloom, we can learn the lesson, because many others who suffered left the footprint out there in various ways. We just have to find a way to connect to that. And that's the connection at the root level of being that we have, I believe. And if we connect with that, I think that life is wonderful. Even going through the difficulties, as we may have seen many in the spiritual field, the ones who have gone through the bad, unbelievable suffering can be enlightened. Not everyone, depends on how and why, but that's the nature's way. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. And it's not just one example, there are a bunch of examples. It depends of us to have the antenna, imagination, to sense it. Whether it's Edison, Steve Jobs, Daisetsu, and many others, Christ, whatever the case may be, and good and bad, intuition, imagination, and something vibrating in us, that they have energy, if we feel that, that is the way pointing us. There's something interesting, worth our life living for understanding and executing such an idea in our life. Matsushita said, passion comes number one. In my work on Tenmei, order of heaven, order from heaven, to point the mission in our life, I went through a series of steps. First is passion, second is challenge, third is going beyond the conventional wisdom out of your mind, let's call it, to get the insight. Then get the satori or insight. And going through that over time, you learn more of the process, like Shila Samadhi Panya, and plan to check that. Brain used, and also our root of our being connected. Then you find the happiness. As you find Tenmei, the way to live, that lead us to the happiness, happy life. Thank you.